Fans, welcome once again to another episode of Extreme Memories with Kris Kloss right here exclusively on the YouTube Wrestling Chatter channel. Again, I'm your host, Kris Kloss. Today on Extreme Memories, everything XPW and a little bit more sprinkled on top. Today we have Angel, the Hardcore Homo Angel, John Chavez. How you doing, sir?
Well, actually, Kris, if you remember correctly, I lost that moniker, that name. Do you remember? Do you remember how I lost it?
Yeah, toward the end. Is this correct?
Yes. The very last XPW show, not Cold Day in Hell, but the other one.
Right.
I challenged Supreme to a death match, and if I lost, I would no longer call myself the Hardcore Homo.
Let me ask you,
I'm the wrestler formerly known as the Hardcore.
So now, what was the reasoning behind that? Do you remember what the reasoning was?
You know what? I hadn't done hardcore in a while, so I figure I shouldn't be called it anyways. And honestly, I think it was because the angle was that it was a match that I wanted to get Supreme. He's always got the upper hand on me, and I challenged him one more time. And one time I said, well, if you're willing to fight me one more time, then I'm willing to put the name up for.
Sure. Wow. Well, you know what? We're going to get more into that as the episode progresses. But anyway, once again, fans, this is Extreme Memories. I'm your host, Kris Kloss. Thank you once again for joining us here on Extreme Memories, exclusively on the Wrestling Chatter channel. Speaking of the Wrestling Chatter channel, guys, like it, subscribe to the channel, like this video, throw us a comment down on the YouTube video, please, and share this video and tell your friends to subscribe to the Wrestling Chatter channel along with Extreme Memories. I'm involved with other shows on this network, including Missed Opportunities, amongst others. So check out the Wrestling Chatter channel, more of the videos that we put up. But Extreme Memories, one of the premier shows here on the Wrestling Chatter channel, and we thank you for your support. We have yet another episode of Extreme Memories. Again, Extreme Memories is going to be debuting and coming up on the 15th and 30th of every month. So check that out. And again, on this episode, we are very happy, privileged, and pleased to have formerly known, the artist, the wrestler formerly known as the Hardcore Homo, Angel from way West Hollywood, California. And I got to tell you, Angel, before we get into, I mean, you have definitely one of the most, I want to call you Angel because we all called you Angel in the back.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we would call each other our names. I mean, my name is my name, but the thing is, it's like some guys we would just call their work names, and most people just called you Angel. So to the point where like, wait, what's his name again? Oh yeah, John. You know, so we really knew you as Angel back in XPW, and after that too. We'll talk a little bit about that. Before we get into XPW, please, we like to start the show off with things the fans don't necessarily know, things in the back, things that happen behind the curtain, if you will. Now that kayfabe has taken a big hit, we can talk about this now, of course, in this day and age in professional wrestling. But getting into professional wrestling, how did you start? When did you get into wrestling? Who trained you, et cetera, et cetera?
I was trained by a guy named Carlos Torres at a place called Slammers. He used to go by Hombre del Oro.
El Hombre del Oro. Yeah.
For the early XPW fans, you might know him as Carlitos Montoya.
Right.
Remember him?
Montana.
Are you sure it was
Carlito? Yeah, his real last name was Montoya, but Carlito Montana.
His real last name was Torres.
Well, yeah. Carlito Montoya. I think
he was a little bit. He was a little thing off of Carlito's Way and Tony Montana. Yeah.
I want to say down the way they changed his name, but I'm sure if I'm wrong about this, forgive me, and I'm sure someone's gonna correct me online. So I thank you before the correction comes in. So thank you.
Yeah, so I was trained by him, as well as some other wrestlers, but mostly him. And I started my training Black Friday of the year 1998. I remember that because it was right after Thanksgiving, the day after. So everybody else was shopping, I was getting my ass kicked.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you came in the Slammers after I was gone. So I was doing
Yes.
like some ring announcing and all that in like the mid to just basically when D. If anybody, for those of you that don't know, Slammers Wrestling Gym was a one of a kind place, old school place
Very
out
old
in Southern.
school.
Very old school. We're talking like kayfabe, and not only that, but this is a place that wrestling stars, when they would come to Southern California, Bobby Heenan. I mean, when the WWF, WCW come, a lot of the old timers would venture out to Slammers Wrestling Gym and pay their respects, pay their visits to this place, because it was just this little holy grail, unassuming little warehouse in the middle of Sun Valley, California, in the San Fernando Valley, and garages all around there, auto parts places, and then you had this like holy grail um, Slammers Wrestling Gym, and it taught kids, taught people, students how to wrestle. But again, when you talk kayfabe, I mean, this place, you would think when you walk in, like, really, you guys are protecting this? It's such a small venue. They held it in high regard, to the point where like you couldn't know anything unless you even if you were in the classes, you didn't necessarily know about the matches with the stars of Slammers that would do their monthly shows. I remember then it was monthly. And they had the wrestling museum there. They had like Gorgeous George's robe, the Mullah's robe, the old Russians from the 50s, like crazy stuff.
You have to also talk about the owner, Vern Langdon. I mean, he was a character in himself. I mean,
a lot of stories with him.
Long stories. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I talk to Carlos every so often, and he tells me all the stories. There's a lot of stuff I didn't even know about Vern. I wish I would have known back then, because I would have asked him about. But yeah, it was an amazing place, and very, very old school, like you said. I mean, I remember when they were doing I don't want to say it was a videotaping for something, and we were students, and they actually made us leave while they were blading and made us come back. That's how old school it was, because they didn't want to teach how to blade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember when I remember first going there, and I was, as a kid, and I was kayfabed right when I came through the door, and at first I was rolling my eyes at, oh, why aren't they telling me what's up? But then like on the drive home, it was like, wait a minute, that was awesome. That's pretty cool. And so, but I basically was gone at the time. So Dynamite D, referee Patrick Hernandez, and Kevin Kleinrock, I forget what he was doing through Slammers, unless he was like, I'm so shocked that I can't remember this right now. Sorry, Kevin. But anyway, he was when D and Patrick and Kevin formed SCCW, they had a little bit of a falling out with Slammers Wrestling Gym and Vern Langdon. So SCCW became this Southern California Championship Wrestling, became this independent promotion, and I was doing ring announcing for them now instead. So this is the company that was the catalyst, basically the unofficial catalyst to XPW, because once D and Patrick and Kevin broke away from Vern and only doing shows exclusively at Slammers Wrestling Gym, we were now operating like an indie fed, basically going to any high school gym, to any boys and girls club, and a little bit more freedom. And keep in mind, this was at a time when you didn't find that many indie shows anywhere in the country.
Exactly.
So this was a special, kind of a fun thing to see the pro wrestling you see on television, but you're seeing it with these different guys in a high school gym. It was kind of cool and just different at that time. We grew up, we didn't not have that at all. So we had WWF when they came to the LA Sports Arena, or WCW at the Forum, Inglewood Fabulous Forum. So this was at a different time. Then XPW became SCCW, again, unofficially became XPW when we as SCTW workers would hand out flyers in the parking lot when the WWF would come to that arena. And we did that. Rob Black got a flyer because he was attending a show at the Arrowhead Pond, and the rest was history. So when you got into Slammers, this is after D, Patrick,
Yes.
myself, and Kevin were no longer there, and you were now in at Slammers. So when you got your training, you started your training in pro wrestling. How was that? Because I mean, you don't need to tell me. I already know what Slammers was about, but talk a little bit about that type of training, that old school mentality, and how that prepared you for what you were about to do. Total opposite of what Slammers stood for in XPW as the Hardcore Homo Angel.
So going into Slammers was, as you said, very old school. I mean, when I first went there, they did not train me at all in pro wrestling. It was all about grappling. They wanted to see if I was going to quit. And when I do talk to Carlos every so often, we bring up, and I thank him for what he did, because in a way you had to prove yourself to be in Slammers. I mean, when I joined, there literally was only about 3 or 4 students in that whole place, because everybody that I would join would either quit or couldn't hang. Those students were El Mongo, Juan Tastico, myself, another guy, I forgot his name, but he ended up, he was there for a while, and I forgot why he left. But there was only 4 students at the time. And every time people would come in, they just could not hang with Slammers, right, because they would not teach you pro wrestling. They would literally, for a couple of months, just stretch you, beat you, and then finally they felt you were going to stick around. They would start showing you how to work by then.
Yeah, and then the
ring itself was one of the stiffest rings I ever wrestled in front of.
I actually took a bump or two in that ring. I've never, of all the shows I've done since starting, and countless shows all over the country, and being in those rings and feeling them out, I don't think I've ever been in a ring that it was as stiff as the Slammers ring. It literally was like you put this thin mat on concrete. Like that's what it felt like.
All it had, it didn't really have, like wrestling rings now have padding. All it was carpet. That's all it was, really. It was carpet. I think Carlos just recently told me, because I asked him, and I remember I asked him just recently when I talked to him last, I go, hey, Carlos, because I do remember him telling me who made the ring, and he did remind me, I think it was Mike Sharp that made the ring, the Sharp brothers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That came from the Sharps. I remember that.
Yes.
And all their memorabilia was up in the lobby. They paid a lot of homage to Iron Mike Sharp and all that. And I remember when I found out, that's how I found out as a kid growing up watching WWF. It was like you knew him as the jobber on Superstars, the Wrestling Challenge. So that was my education to who him and a lot of the guys were. When you went into Slammers, it really was, and they had the museum there, just the lobby before you go into it. It was all like
pictures on the wall. Yeah,
it was like when you go into like a Jewish deli. And you have all those celebrity pictures throughout, or an Italian delicatessen, you like in LA or New York, and you have all the celebrity pictures. That's what it was like, just the lobby. That's just the lobby where people were allowed into, unless it was a day for the show. And remember, this was just like a garage. It was a warehouse. And so that little front office was like, if you could imagine the front office to a garage where you pay the guy to put the tires on or whatever, and where the cars are being fixed or stored, that's where the wrestling ring was. So as a fan, you only got to go into that part of it where the ring was on the day of the show. They kayfabe that to death. And then behind there, next to the office, in the same room as the ring, you had a legitimate pro wrestling Hall of Fame museum. You had Gorgeous George. You had the Fabulous Moolah. I forget the Russians, but I remember there was one. It was in like you are walking into Ripley's in Hollywood, like the way they had these glass cases set up. They took it very seriously. The lighting was done in a very class way. You had the old Russians with the Soviets hammer and sickle flag, and a few others. I just can't remember offhand, but I remember Gorgeous
Then
George.
you had that bloody ring that you would see, and you'd be like, "Oh
Yeah,
wow, there has been some
yeah.
battles in this day."
There have been some battles, and there were for sure. And
going back to how stiff
yeah,
that ring was, I mean,
yeah,
you mentioned how that led me to helping XPW or how it helped me. That ring is probably one of the stiffest rings I've ever wrestled in. I mean, you can say, you've been in it. There's a reason why I used to bump like crazy on on floors and everything else, because it hurt just about as much as that ring. So I was used to bumping in that ring. Didn't bother me when I bump on floors. Take a back bump right off the ring apron onto like the basketball floor. Remember at the high school, that did not bother me because that was slammers every single time they would slam you on that ring.
That's amazing. And
yeah.
That's really amazing. But look, if you've been to Slammers and you felt that ring, I mean, that's the first time I'm hearing this from you. I mean, I remember you came out of Slammers. I of course remember that part. But this is the first time hearing this from you. Where like, okay, that ring prepared you for those very intense bumps, because I knew you came from Slammers. Of course, I knew I called all your matches when you took those bumps. But I never, in my knowing both those worlds, I never put that together, but it makes perfect sense. And again, this is just an old way of training that was still going all the way up until the late 90s or early 2000s. I can't remember when they officially closed down.
I was one of the last. This four groups that I talked about were the last of that group, because Slammer shut down right after that. So that was right around a little. I started in '98 and it lasted a little less than 2 years, and then it just shut down.
Okay, so basically,
it never came back.
So I guess it made it to the 2000s, which is which is a big feat. I vaguely remember that when we were doing XPW, we were so caught up in Extreme Pro Wrestling that, I mean, I even lost touch with what was going on in the wrestling world at times, because we were just so caught up in our product that I had to catch up and just see, hey, what's going on in WWE, what's going on in WCW was still alive at that time, and ECW was barely just about gone at that time. But in 2001, I think, yeah. So 2001, both WCW and ECW. But nonetheless, so that was Slammers. I mean, look, I like talking about it because, look, nobody can see it now. And for those that remember, no explanation is necessary. But for those that didn't know, in many ways, no explanation will do. But I would still want to get that across to people, how this awesome old school place that I don't think you'll find any place like this in America, in the world, maybe in Japan, somewhere right like that, or Mexico. But that was a beautiful dinosaur for when we went there, that we were privileged enough to kind of see and be in that world at that time, as small as it was, just that old school vibe of guys taking it seriously. And that, I think, in many ways, prepared, I'm sure, everybody that was involved to be in the wrestling business, to be in a company. Of course, the business has changed now. There, kids that get into wrestling now, they don't have any of that. They're not even growing up, actually, with this sense of kayfabe that we actually at least remember and grew up with. So even though it's maybe not totally gone, but it's definitely changed to the point where that was the basis of pro wrestling in many ways, is kayfabe, and everything builds off that foundation. Angel,
I mean, because me and you were kind of blessed. I think we're similar in age, but we were blessed to have some of the great generations in wrestling that we got to see. I mean, we got to see the '80s, of course, the '90s, the Attitude Era, if people would call it, all that crazy stuff that happened. We got to see some amazing stuff, and some of the greatest characters that people still imitate today came out of those eras. And you really don't see it that much anymore. Wrestling, you said, has changed a little bit. I really don't follow it as much anymore. If you show me a wrestler now on TV, I probably wouldn't recognize them.
I mean,
and that was the one thing. That was bringing back to Slammers. That was one thing they were very strict on. You could not watch wrestling because they never wanted you to repeat what you saw on TV. They wanted you to be unique.
And that was, again, the old way of usually the old way of operating in the old the outlaw territories.
Yes.
You know, you focus on your own product, and if you have a super show, that's fine. You go over it when that match comes.
You would not call a match in the back. They would give you three spots you can call, and that was it. And you need to finish. That was it. Everything else you had to ad lib.
Exactly. And think about this part too. Like when you say, because people that watch this might not understand the fact that, like, oh, you can't watch any other pro wrestling. Well, as a pro wrestler, how do you know what's going on? Well, think about this. If you're in a wrestling company, now we're all one team. Like XPW, for example, or any wrestling company, you treat that like you're a football team in the locker room. You're all going against each other, but we are one league and one team. We all depend on each other, right? But within that world, okay, you don't necessarily need to know within your own company, your own league, in that locker room, what the other guy's feud and storyline is about. You got to focus on your own feud and your own storyline. So if you don't even need to know the guys in your own league and their storyline, what they're going through, then why do you need to know what's going on in the rest of the wrestling world? You know, so it really comes down to focusing on what you're doing. You can watch, you can get an education, but you're never, ever, even with kayfabe being gone, I try to tell people, it still doesn't measure up to direct experience of being in the locker room, performing, being a part of the booking, the storyline, the production aspect of it. You don't need to know what's going on in the wrestling world. You get that education as a fan, and then you take the step to get that education when you're backstage. But as much as people are more educated, people know more what's going on, and you could go to a magic show, and it will take a little bit of mystique out if it's not it's a work. The magic is a work, but you don't necessarily know how the magician is doing it. However, now that kayfabe has taken a hit, you know how the magician is doing it, but you still don't have that experience of the magician being on stage and performing with the psychology of the crowd, all that stuff. You still aren't going to get exactly. So yeah, you're right. It's not crucial to know what's going on in the rest of the wrestling world. It's crucial to know what's going on and what you're doing. And if it works, that's all that you need to know. If you're getting over, that's all you need to know. And you already learned the guidelines, the do's and don'ts of respecting the business. And that's all you need to know. You don't need to know what the champion in the other league looks like or what he's doing necessarily. If you want to work for another company, then yeah, you better brush up and do your homework. You can do that, but you don't necessarily need to be a wrestler in any federation or any league, indie league. And, oh man, I don't know what's going on in WWE. I don't think I can do this. No, you're okay. You're okay. You can always catch up. You can always catch up, and even stuff that, like, if you were out of it for the last 5 years, you can still catch up. Look at the title history and all that, and you know how the cycle runs and how this process works. That's all you need to know. So, Angel, let's go right into it then. So when Slammers is closed down, it was the year 2000. It was Metal Fest in San Bernardino, California, that we thought was like the incarnation of the real life story of the Jungle Book. It was this. You were in a sea of like metal fans, face paint and everything. And if you can imagine, folks, like the story of the Jungle Book, the little boy in the red underpants, like lost in the woods. That's what I even said that on the video.
Mobley, right? Or what is it?
Yeah, and I guess Crack was Baloo the bear, right? But that nonetheless, that was your debut. XPW had already run shows at the LA Sports Arena. We've had Go Funk Yourself. Sabu was already there. Shane Douglas was there. Abdul the Butcher, and of course all the homegrown guys have really started to step into their own. Guys like Homeless Jimmy, White Trash Johnny Webb, Kid Chaos, Supreme, Messiah, of course. Guys like this that you probably crossed paths with. I have too, on our way to going into XPW. And these guys were featured along with these other stars. And this was after the Heat Wave incident. This was after like a lot of eyeballs. And of course, we were on television at this point. We started to get syndicated all over the country. Home videos were in every video star. Entertainment, or Extra TV had us at the number 4 sports, not wrestling, but the number 4 sports DVD sold in the country. So knowing all this at the time, how did you get involved? How did you get into XPW? And was there a lot of pressure for you knowing, like I started from the ground floor up, but you came in when all this momentum was already taking place. So how was that for you, and how did this all unfold?
Well, so how I came into XPW, my trainer Carlos was kind of slowly starting to leave. He didn't really want to wrestle anymore. And his advice to us was, this is after Slammers had closed down, was to go train at the Asylum.
Right.
Remember they used to have it. They moved to the bigger warehouse, but it was a smaller warehouse.
Well, at first,
the one that Messiah and Supreme had their fight, like their street fight in.
That was the first office. It was right near the Van Nuys Airport, right near the Airtel Hotel. And we were there for the first, I want to say until like 2001, late 2001, sometime early, mid 2001. We moved over to North Hollywood off Van Owen and Laurel Canyon, somewhere around there. And not too far.
So they would have,
but the Asylum was the pro wrestling training school for XPW.
Correct. So at first I was a little hesitant to go there. I was always watching on television, but I wasn't sure if I really where my path was going to go. And Fantastica was going there, and Almongo was going there, and they were convincing me, well, you should come try it out, So finally I went, and I would wrestle a little bit, and doing some crazy stuff, because obviously that ring felt nothing like Slammers, so I was willing to do crazier stuff in that ring.
Right.
And one day Rob had noticed me, was walking out of his office, because Rob's office was right next to the ring back then.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he sees me, and he just kind of says, "Hey, how do you say it?" It was something like, "Hey, kid, can you work?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, can you work? What do you mean, can you work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can work. I can work." He goes, "You know what? I'm going to make you Crack's bitch." And that was it. And I said, "Okay." And one thing Slammers always taught me was, you never turn down any role. Never turn it down. It's the old school way. You always, no matter what they give you, you just do it. Because you never know you're going to get an opportunity. And so I said, sure, I'll do it. I didn't know what they meant by that. I didn't know what he meant by that. And then I think like a week later, Kevin Kleinrock came in and started talking about these angles that we're going to be doing with Crack, and that they weren't sure if Crack was gay, because he would have those innuendos, but really not say he was. So they wanted, the reason I got the name Angel, because it was actually a gender neutral name. You could not tell when they were talking about it, if it was a woman or a man. That's how I got the name Angel. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's how I started. That's how I actually got involved in XPW.
Wow. So yeah, like you said, when you come from an old school place, it's like, hey, look, this is pro wrestling. You don't turn anything down. Again, as an actor, are you going to turn down a role you're playing because I don't want to be that person? It's acting, right? And so in a way, this is pro wrestling. It's a work. Now the pain is real, and you experience a lot of pain in that ring, and you did things with this character out the shoot. You weren't doing necessarily all this hardcore wrestling and painful stuff. You were doing other storyline hardcore stuff, but
there was no limit. I still love XPW because there was no, it would not fly nowadays, but there was no limit to what Rob's and XPW's imagination was. They would do some crazy stuff. I can imagine if we were having this crazy year we're having now, the ideas Rob would have came up with, with all this stuff happening.
Hey, if you look at XPW TV, I don't know what episode, Crack raped me.
Yeah.
So the storyline.
It was not. Unfortunately, it was not the last rape scene we ever saw on XPW TV.
Yeah, so technically, announcer Kris Kloss has been raped by wrestler Crack, and then business as usual. No one's getting in trouble. I'm calling his match like nothing happened. And then Rivera and I, it was funny, man. We had to do those takes so many times because we were laughing, and I would sit down and I would claim that nope, this is hemorrhoids, Rivera. This is so. I mean, just funny stuff, man.
That's the thing. We never really took ourselves serious because
you can't.
We can't really, and I think that's why the fans loved us because although we didn't take ourselves serious, what you did see in the ring, we did take serious. I mean, you saw those beatdowns Supreme used to give in the offices. Legit, he would punch those students in the face. I felt many of them. I mean, we took liberties with each other. We were not afraid to hit each other. It was the mentality of let's just go out there and you know what? As long as we don't break a bone, break some teeth, we're good to go.
Yeah, people bring up that Supreme thing quite a bit, and I mean that one lives in infamy. When the storyline was like he was pissed off at Rob Black, and he goes into the office with Chaos, and Chaos is trying to like, hey, calm down, and Supreme, no, I don't care, and then security, which were the students of the asylum. So that was the big mistake too, because what do students have to do? They have to pay their dues, right?
Yeah.
So if you So, I mean, I remember I wasn't there when they filmed that. Like I remember I might have come that day. You know, I can't remember. Maybe I was there. I just can't remember right now. But I just remember when those kids, actually, you know what? Yeah, I was there because I remember being off camera when they threw Low-Key Steve into the wall. But I remember thinking before this even happened, I'm like, it wasn't planned. And like, I knew he's going to stiff him because these are students paying their dues. Like he's going to go after him, and just like a badge of honor in a way. Like it sounds pretty brutal right now, but that's just how, in some ways, you got lucky if you didn't have to go through that. But like that's paying your dues in wrestling the old school way, right? You're not going to see that anymore. You're just not. But anyway, so that was so yeah, you definitely had a lot of realism in your matches, of course, right? But talk about the gimmick. Okay, so Rob basically came up with the genesis of the gimmick. You're going to be Crack's bitch, and you and Crack are basically what we called life partners, right? We never said the G word. We never said it, but it was obviously implied, right? So you got over like Rover, man. Like you got over.
No, the fans hated us obviously in the beginning. I mean, this was early 2000. It was a different era back then, you know.
Right.
It wasn't like nowadays. They hated me when I first came out,
right.
And not that you may have remembered this, or maybe wasn't told of it, but I was really never supposed to wrestle with them. I was always going to be just Crack's manager.
Yeah.
But I was not going to let that opportunity go by. Anytime I had a chance, I was willing to take some crazy bumps. I think was it the deathmatch tournament we did or something? I can't remember who it was that Crack was working. I want to say it was Vic Grimes or something. And I'm getting, bumping off the apron, and then he throws me, and I don't even hold the ropes. I just take a boom. And all you hear in that parquet basketball floor is thunk,
Yeah.
And I remember coming in the back, and Rob's like, he sees me, says, God damn, you're a bumping machine. And little by little,
baby.
I was doing some crazier and crazier stuff, and little by little, they gave me a chance, and I would wrestle, and they saw I could wrestle, and little by little, I became the wrestler, and Crack kind of became my manager.
Right. And that was because Crack was there early on, and it was I believe it was against Vic Grimes, and I remember that was a good match because Crack was a little bit underrated. He was a newbie in the business, but he could move, like a Vic Grimes and like a Pogo, and I don't know. I guess because he just didn't have that. Like everyone knew who Vic Grimes was. Some people knew who Pogo was from his days up north, even though he became a different character. But for Crack to be right out the gate, and I hope we can have him on, and we will have him on. I'm actually. He's unofficially booked right now for coming on Xtreme Memories in the future. But he was a little underrated. But again, now Rob saw something in you. And this is why I tell people in wrestling, in life, basically, is never assume, because you just never know in wrestling. Never say never. Even when, like, people get fired and there's a ton of heat, never say never. Anything can happen, right? And so never assume, because they assumed that Crack was going to be the guy and you were going to be the manager, basically. And it basically flipped. Who would have saw that coming? So now,
who also would have saw coming? I mean, we can skip ahead a little bit, just real quick. I was always part of the Black Army. I technically was a heel, but when I officially became the Hardcore Homo, those fans were cheering for me, because at that point, I think I earned their respect. And for a heel coming in, they were loving me. And even in Philadelphia, where they at first hated us because we'll probably talk about that later. But going into Philadelphia the first time, they did not want us there. And because of what I did in those matches, they ended up earning, I earned their respect. Little by little, they were cheering me on. They loved when my music hit, they would pop. They would pop because they knew that even if it wasn't a death match, I was going to give them something crazy.
It's funny. I remember back in the day on a message board. It's funny you bring up Philadelphia and them not liking you. I remember like the East Coast fans writing on a message board, "Hey, maybe I cheer for him if they honor the East Coast, like if he's from Greenwich Village. But what's up with way West Hollywood? That's West Coast." Like that's what they were upset at, right? Yeah, so it wasn't like an East Coast gay community. But again, that was interesting, because you had to gain the respect for, look at, this is wrestling, and yes, a lot has changed, but like, of course, like, you're not gonna back a gay character with the basically a bunch of jock wrestling fans that, of course, homophobia is going to run rampant.
Back in that era, I mean, I'm not saying it's a long time ago, but back in then, it wasn't. I mean, it was accepted, but not like it is nowadays.
Of course,
very, very. People back then told you how they felt. And going down when I first was a heel, I mean, I heard every name in the book manageable. I mean, stuff I will not repeat on here, but you're like, holy shit, these fucking assholes.
and that's another thing. Like, your character, like, it was over. So the fans gained your respect because they see you're taking bumps and you're doing what they want to see wrestling wise. And then that kind of I feel like it softened their guard for, like, I don't want to like this gay character. But now they got into the comic side of Angel Way West Hollywood and playing it up when you brought Mr. Prickles to the ring, which was a large dildo wrapped in barbed wire. That was your good buddy, Mr. Prickles, right? And Mr. Prickles is here. It's kind of like Frankie with Coco Beware. Oh, yeah, Frankie's here. Mr. Prickles is here this week. But so then it got to the point where it was cool to like cheer for Angel and just get into the whole, which was rare. You kind of snuck through the cracks, and no pun intended with crack, but you snuck through the cracks, kind of like Leroy did. Leroy RCT.
Oh yeah, Leroy.
Yeah, he kind of
sweep it up, asshole. Sweep it up. Remember that?
Exactly. So he morphed that into like what the fans didn't like, and he morphed that into the character that they eventually did like, because for whatever reason, and you did kind of the same thing with your Angel character, not the Angel, the creation of the genesis of Angel character, but the fact that you got these. Who would expect like a hardcore? Imagine ECW crowd like cheering this totally flamboyant guy coming out with a dildo, but it happened, right? And that would have happened, and your character would have happened and gotten over in an ECW. It would have gotten over in these kind of feds with that kind of fan, that mentality of these hardcore wrestling fans. So the thing is, now, even though that was loved and beloved, and look, you got a crowd that would never, let's say, embrace or accept this flamboyant gay character. So you would think this is a positive thing. However, when I ponder it now with the way society has changed, could this character work today?
Nope.
And I don't think so. I don't think so. Even though you did something in a positive light. Yes, you use comedy, and there was maybe a little bit of a degrading part to gays and all that. but there was something that you did to make a crowd accept a gay character that normally would not. So that part was a positive, but unfortunately with the blinders on today, nobody would look at that part of it and they would just say, nope, canceled immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a little bit of a shame, because you're not like really kind of dissecting and see like some of the positives that your character brought to this wrestling audience.
Exactly. I mean, we never in XPW ever made fun of the gay culture or anything like that. We went to the extreme on it.
We did a little bit. We did,
but there was nothing mean. When we did it.
Mm-hmm. Not at all.
We did everything, and we tried to do everything that eventually the fans were going to love me, or love the character. Love Crack, all the other characters we ever did. We did some crazy stuff in XPW. I mean, we had racist on the
all of it,
right?
I mean, it's no different. It's no different than South Park or Family Guy. As long as we're equal opportunists, like every race is going to get knocked equally, then I mean, it might not fly today, but personally, I think that's kind of a green light. Like I can accept that form of entertainment because you're not like pigeonholing one. Even there was a point in time where
everybody.
It was everybody. It was everybody, because there was a point too where like Lou Cypher was like this Nazi character, so he was like this heel that was wrong for what he was doing. So I mean, really, everybody and anybody got made fun of. And I remember like even my character with Rivera, like I had to.
Oh yeah,
like
I mean, not everybody knows, but Rivera does not talk like that. He just
right. So I mean, when you talk to, and we'll have him on here, but when you talk to Pat, he just sounds like some guy that's grown up in, I don't know, Orange County and been surfing all his life. He sounds like a California guy, right?
He does not sound like that character you saw on television.
But we would play that racial thing off between the two. We'd have so much fun with it. And even now, like I look back at some of that stuff, like, gosh, as innocent as that was, and it wasn't even real, it's like, I don't even think that would fly now. And not only that, but even with you, Angel, like, sometimes I look back at like some of this footage, especially before this episode, kind of gearing up for our interview here. Like I'm watching when we throw it to your match and we talk about Angel and West Hollywood. And if I just like make a little, ooh, like just a little something like that, I think would be like insensitive now. But again, I look at it like I was playing a regular straight announcer, right? I mean, I don't mean straight in the sense of like sexual preference, but that's what it was. And it was like, if I'm straight, then I can be disgusted by that. And if you're gay, you can be disgusted by something straight. So I didn't think that was ever an issue, right? And now, like I said, I feel like there's no dissecting any of these things in our culture, at least right now. And nope, it's just canceled immediately. We don't even want to go into it. So I'm only talking about some of the lighter things that we did, but and just making a point that even some of these tame, light things that we did would just be a big no-no today. So saying that, going into this now, after we're talking about the lighter stuff, let's talk about some of the more extreme, controversial things, even for back then, when we're at the advent of the end of the Attitude Era. I mean, we're at a time where it's all about freedom of expression in this country. And you look at old footage of WWE, WWF, and you look at like all the signs in the audience, it's like such a different world. How like, hey, as long as it's freedom of expression, this was the Howard Stern era where it was celebrated that everybody's different and expressing themselves. And if it's offensive to somebody, that's the price of freedom of speech in this country, right? So we're in that era, but you're still doing things, Angel, you specifically, you're still doing things that are controversial. I mean, you're going to the ring with a dildo, you're doing like mannerisms to your opponent, to the referee, sometimes to fans in the audience. I mean, you had to have a ball doing this, playing and just talk about psychology at its height, and we would play that up on the announcing. Like, I can't believe he's doing this. Like, what is he thinking? And of course, again, getting disgusted by it all. But talk about a little bit like what you think some of the more controversial things that you were involved with, and if you got some backlash from fans, etc.
I never really got backlash from fans. I mean, once again, this was a different time back then.
Right.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and really, this is the time the Attitude Era started, and you saw how much crazy stuff they ever did. I mean, you had some crazy ideas, and crazy characters you probably would not see nowadays either. So if the big guys are doing it, why couldn't we? We just took it a little bit more extreme because we weren't on national television like we were on television, but not like what they were. So we were doing some crazy stuff. I mean, there's a lot of, can't think of a lot of particular times I could say like, oh, wow, that's, very, very controversial. I would, can you think of anything? I'm trying to think because it's been
other
than me like trying to always give you a blowjob or end up some kind of.
Well, hey, technically too.
Yeah,
Not only was Kris Kloss raped by crack, but Kris Kloss was inadvertently, unbeknownst to him, given a blowjob in a jacuzzi from one angel.
Yes.
Well, this was I'm talking about the 100th episode of XPW TV, and it was
I remember that.
Yeah, man. So this was after Rivera had gone and Wantastico took his place. And we were in a jacuzzi celebrating the 100th episode. And this was actually in Woodland Hills, where Kevin Kleinrock lived at a complex called the Summit on Shoup and Oxnard there. And between Shoup and Topanga Canyon, Woodland Hills. And it was a nice complex with jacuzzis and pools. So we go down there. We had to be quiet because the pool was closed, right? And we got in the pool and Wantastico, this is it, the 100th episode. And he already had a girl with him, a porn girl. Hey, Kloss, don't worry, your girl's coming. Let's just get on with the show. And he goes, Kloss, you got to relax. You're in your suit and tie. Like, we got to relax in the jacuzzi. So I just took my tie off and then I went into the jacuzzi. I left my suit on. But anyway, like as the episode was ending, it goes, all right, Kloss, close your eyes. And she's here. And then like we're simulating. This is how controversial this stuff was. We're simulating that I'm being pleasured in the jacuzzi with my eyes closed and thinking it's Wantastico, one of his girls. And then I'm like, oh, baby, come here. And it's you. And and then I ran and you chase me and I stumble into the pool and then you're chasing me. And of course you have a G-string thong on, I mean,
yeah. I remember that day. You just brought
this is just, I mean, it was great television. It was great television. And it was, again, you cannot take yourself seriously if you're going to do stuff like this, right?
Here's a good example of the craziness we're living in right now. With not having fans at shows, and having to think outside the box for professional wrestling. Well, we did that a long time ago because there's a long time before after the Metal Fest, we did not do shows. I think it was over like a year, and we were doing some crazy stuff and still entertaining fans. Still getting the emails over without actually doing anything live. There was plenty of empty arena matches. Remember when Chaos was wrestling Bridget the Midget and who else? There was a bunch of other people that would so we were doing some stuff that was very innovative, different now, but same thing now, with no fans, but we were entertaining, We always thought of ways to entertain the fans and we couldn't give them live wrestling because for some reason or another, we didn't have a venue or something came up.
Right. And like you said, like we had like basically we had our mini COVID right there. Like after Metal Fest, it was like I don't think it was quite a year, but it was because that was late 2000. It was a few months until we started doing shows. That was November of 2000, and maybe we started up in like February or March. But that was a long time for wrestling.
Like, do you remember how we got the Chris? Here's a little trivia. Do you remember how we got the high school or the gimmick? Why we got the high school?
Oh my gosh! When you tell me, it'll come back. It was a storyline.
Yes, it was a storyline.
Oh man, give me a hint. Patriot Hall, Birmingham High School.
It had to do with me actually.
Oh, like you, it was part. Was it part of like the YMCA or the Boys and Girls
No, no,
Club?
no, no,
Like,
no. Apparently, Angel came from that high school.
oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
reason why in the first, I think, first show we ever did at the high school, or second show we ever did at the high school, you see me wearing the Birmingham shirt. When the
yes,
school
yes,
found this out, they actually made XPW tell them you're not allowed to have that character wear the shirt. He did not come from
yeah.
this high school, and they were a little
And
freaked out
and
about what was happening.
and imagine that, right? Imagine that they were taking the moral high ground, saying
Yeah.
this gay character can't wear Birmingham
Well, I
High.
don't know if it was they just didn't want to be associated. They were just renting us the building. I believe that's
Okay,
truly what it was. It wasn't because of that. It was just
you don't think so? You don't think it really was though? The way you came out with the little croc top on, and I mean, you could have rubbed someone the wrong way, but they would never admit it
but
if it
me
was.
or in general the show. I mean this. I don't know how or what they did to convince that high school that maybe they came in and said oh no, we're just a small little wrestling promotion. They had no idea it was owned by a pornographer and then
No
all that
clue.
other stuff. And maybe when they came in, they thought they were just getting a wholesome wrestling show, stuff like you said. You'd go back on Slammer's days and see, and then all of a sudden you have this crazy thing that's on television where you have, myself, racist, and guys like Kevin Kleinrock, jacking off, and they're looking at this stuff saying, "Oh my God, what did we get ourselves into?" So maybe they did not want to be associated with the show itself, so they said, please, we're renting you the building. Don't let any association with the character or anybody who, like myself, wear any shirts that says that
Right.
I came from Birmingham.
Yeah, and imagine that, like you're watching that television product, and it was very prominent. Of course, it was on where that high school existed, and you have like kids watching, and then we're constantly saying throughout the program, okay, we're back here ringside, Birmingham High School, Patriot Hall in Van Nuys. So we're saying where this place is, and then so people hear that on television, and then, oh, this is what goes on in that gym. So yeah, we had an expiration date, and we wore out our welcome. It was only
Yeah,
inevitable, but that was actually a blessing in disguise, because again, we'd already been to the LA Sports Arena, but then had we stayed at Birmingham High and Patriot Hall, we may never have gone into the Grand Olympic Auditorium. So
yes, yes.
so and that historic venue is now turned into a Korean church on Yoaseo, but thank God it is still there, because there's always hope something will happen, because there was a church at the Forum,
And
and
now
that
it's back to
saved.
the court.
Yeah, and that's the Forum. So you can say that about the Olympic, but the sports arena, it's gone. It's done. So you can't say it. So as much as people say, oh, that's a shame about the Olympic. Like, look, hey, at least it's still there. The seats are in there. You never know, right? And it's not torn down. It's so old. But talk about that, man. Talk about, like, here's a kid from the Valley. You grew up. You started training in Slammers. You come into XPW. You get this outlandish, obnoxious, controversial gimmick of the Hardcore Homo Angel, and then you wrestle at the Grand Olympic Auditorium. That was a big deal for a lot of people. To me, it ramped up the television product. Like I felt like when we went in there, not only did a lot of the guys step their game up because they're wrestling at the Olympic, but I felt like that's what we needed for our company at that status, to be on television and to have matches with the crowd and the way the Olympic Auditorium looked, as opposed to Birmingham High School, right? Or other venues that were not the LA Sports Arena. We had other good venues like Reseda, Ventura Theater. Those looked all right too. But the Grand Olympic, I thought that was a huge notch up, because we already took that notch with the LA Sports Arena. We had a little pitfall, and then we were back doing shows at legitimate places. So how was that to you, the
It was
Olympic?
amazing. It was an amazing thing because I love wrestling history. And I knew the history of the Grand Olympic Auditorium. Guys like Freddie
Right.
Blassie would wrestle out of there. It was the God, what's their names? The LaBelles would run out of it.
Yeah.
They were
Right.
promoters out of it. So I knew about the history of the Grand Olympic Auditorium. So going there was like, wow, this is a really historic place. Going in there, so there were some great matches back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Sometimes even the 70s.
Into the early 80s.
Yeah, even some of the 80s. And then here we are, XPW coming in. And like you said, coming from the high school, I know a lot of fans did love the high school shows because it's a little bit more intimate. They were closer together. They really got to see the action. Where you're in the Olympic Auditorium, it's a much bigger venue. I think it held like close to 5,000 people if we can fill it out or something similar to that.
Seven.
Was
like
it that
8
big?
or 9? Yeah. Remember, the sports arena was 16,000 for wrestling. So, I mean, I think actually the Grand Olympic was close to 10,000, like 9 or 10,000. Yeah.
Yeah, but it gave you that, it was like when you went in there, you're like, wow, you're wrestling out of this big old place. I mean, when we first walked in, God, what was the first show we ever did out of there?
I believe it was Scene of the Crime, which was in 2001. I'll pull it up here, and we have the Wrestling Chatter channel crew working here. Okay, so yeah, Scene of the Crime, April 21st, 2001. Actually, that was Josh Lazy. And I think that was his last show, if I remember. It's funny, April 21st, oddly enough, that show, April 21st, coincided with the XFL championship game was held just down the street at the LA Coliseum. And we were, And I remember a few fans, reason I bring this up is because a few fans were like conflicted on where to go. And there were some fans at XPW that had XFL jerseys. Like, you know what? We couldn't miss this. So we're listening on our radio or whatever it was. And I remember that was coinciding with the LA Xtreme with an X.
We had some rabid fans. I mean, we can just go into some of the crazy stuff with that our fans were. I mean, I remember there was one fan that one day he pulled us aside and says, he had all these ticket stubs and they're all bloodied up. And and he knew whose blood it was. He was like, oh, this is Johnny Webb's blood. This is Homeless Jimmy's blood.
Right.
And you're like thinking like, oh, that's kind of unsanitary.
So weird. So weird.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was weird.
But our fans loved us. We were a cult in a way.
I know, yeah. No, I was going to say, as weird as it might seem, it's like, the dedication and the love they had outweighed any weirdness that it was. So we were all a part of this weird world.
Yeah,
we can't sit here and call that weird when we're the ones promoting and producing these shows, and you guys are the ones actually doing the bleeding. So we're all. I remember
when Supreme got burned. They I don't know who it was, either Kevin or it had to be Kevin. He pulls us aside and says, look at what this fan wrote. It was a handwritten letter, and he had said, he was pretty much saying Supreme, he loved Supreme, that he wished he could take the pain for whatever the scars that the burning was going to cause. He goes, and I don't remember if it was something like, I wish my dad took your place for the burning. Why did it have to happen to you, Supreme? It was really weird, but yet you're thinking like, man, these fans really, really love these characters we show them on television.
Yeah.
We had some of the craziest fans ever. I mean, even our fans had names.
Yeah, it's amazing how there was that base that like XPW was their baby. And like, unfortunately at that time there was such a big turf war between ECW and XPW. And I think if that turf war never existed, you would have a lot more fans that would like wouldn't be so prideful and like, I can't go to XPW because I'm an ECW fan. If that was eliminated, I mean, we would have, with the amount of exposure we had, and we did have big crowds, but I think with the amount of exposure and the amount of star power we had, there would be no reason why we wouldn't have drawn just as big.
Let's flip that on its script here too. I remember, much like you said in the message boards, when we first went to Philadelphia, there was a lot of fans that says, we're not going to that show. We're going to boycott it. Not only did Rob he either purchased or leased the building at that time, and everybody knew about it.
He ended up purchasing it.
They were kicking out, I think it was Combat Zone Wrestling. So a lot of those fans who were saying, we're not going to go to this show. So we were expecting like, wow, are we really going to have a big crowd? And first show we ever did there, Hostile Takeover, we had a pretty good sized crowd there. For all the people that said they weren't going to go because we disrespected ECW, because Rob Black bought the building and pretty much said no other wrestling company can run out of there except XPW. You know, these fans still came and saw us because they wanted to see what the word was about, if we really could stand. And at first, the first couple matches, they would not. They hated us. I mean, they did not want us there. And I remember Shane Douglas was in the back giving us, the pep talk, to get us pumped up. And one thing he says, like, listen, these fans are not they do not want you here. He lives in Pittsburgh. He was not too far away. So he knew what they were going to say. He goes, these fans do not want you here. He goes, well, we're going to show them tonight why we need to be here. And he goes, and he looked over at me and Supreme, he says, and tonight, I truly believe these two guys right here, and he points to us and says, these two guys, what they're going to do is going to change their minds. And it seemed like right after that, that crazy, because we weren't the main event. We were somewhere in the middle. And right after that crazy match me and Supreme had, where I think I got power bombed off the balcony. The tide changed. They slowly started loving things we were doing for them. Every match after that got a little louder, and you started hearing those XPW chants. So
that's one of yeah. You're right, and it was like at first these fans kind of looked at it like a guilty pleasure. Okay, it's almost like a car crash. I don't want to be involved in it, but I got to look at it, and that's what XPW was to a lot of these fans. And again, you had look in many walks of entertainment or media, whatever. In large part, most of the time, any press is good press.
Yes,
you're gonna get.
Yeah, he loved that.
Yeah. I mean,
good or
so
bad,
true.
as long as they're talking about you.
In the moment, it feels like we shouldn't be doing this, but if you have the foresight and you could see if you could see the big picture, like Rob, you got to give him credit. He did. He understood this. And that's basically what it came down to, like, I don't like XPW, but I'm going to go, I don't, it's like, again, rubbernecking on a freeway. I don't want to look at that, but you look anyway, so, but so now you're in Philadelphia. We are in Philadelphia. XPW crosses over to the other side of the country, and we are performing where ECW used to perform in Philly. Now, this was a huge move for us because we're basically primarily not only in the West Coast, but XPW was pretty much in Southern California. Yeah, we go to Ventura, Bakersfield, San Bernardino.
Well, right after the Olympics,
Hollywood.
we actually did Pico Rivera Sports Arena.
Of course, Pico Rivera too, and that we don't want to skip that because that was some crazy stuff that you did, which I believe a lot of the times when people talk about XPW, that gets a little bit overshadowed when talking about one of the most crazy spots in wrestling history, because people automatically go to Vic Grimes and New Jack at XPW's Freefall at the 40-foot scaffold match, right? Which is justifiably. And then, of course, at XPW's Rapture when Supreme basically got lit on fire. So I think a lot of the times, Angel, your moments, I think, get a little bit, not intentionally, but they get a little underrated because you have a little competition with some of the other things, more high profile stars that were involved in some of these bumps. So talk a little bit about that. There was an exploding ring match, and you came off a scaffold as well, and amongst other things at Pico Rivera.
And I'll go back to that right now. One of the things fans usually tell me is like, what's one of the matches I am proud, one of my proudest matches in XPW. And honestly, I always would bring up, it was what the hell is it called? The Raw Sewage match. And
okay, right.
The match was great, but the reason I want to say it was probably one of my proudest moments was because here we are, we have Lizzie Borden and Veronica Kane, and these two girls really didn't wrestle. They were just they were in the business of the porn part. And I ended up putting that match together. GQ Money helped me out a little bit, but he was kind of busy doing the Extreme Associates stuff, so he really didn't have a lot of time. And I got these two girls together, and we said, we're going to put a match together because a lot of fans do not think this match is going to be any good, because you guys do not wrestle. You're just kind of be thrown in this match together. And these girls, I hate to use the word practice, but we did go over the match quite often.
I remember that.
We were trying to figure out what they could do in the match to make themselves get over. and I would come up with ideas, and they would try. And I remember Veronica King, when she first walked the rope, she jumped off and did the arm drag and got injured, and she was kind of like upset, and she went and got Johnny Webb. She's like, I don't know if he knows what he's teaching us right, how to do it right. And Johnny just said, he goes, listen, I've seen him, Angel wrestle. He goes, just let him do what he's doing. Just trust him on this. And she did. And we went for weeks. We were just trying out this match and trying different things with them. And in the end, I think that was one of the greatest matches that I'm very proud of, because these two girls who did not know anything about wrestling, they saw it. They saw what we did, but they were never, ever fully trained in wrestling. They put on one hell of a match. I mean, I remember when we got back to the back, Rob Black hugged everybody, all of us, and said he was very proud, because he would watch, and he would come out and watch when we were practicing these matches, when we were putting this match together, and he knew exactly where he. Great thing was Rob was watching it, so he knew, because he was the guy who was directing all the cameras back then. He was like, go to this camera angle. Let's go to this camera angle. They're going to do this spot right now. Make sure there's a camera right up there. So he's yelling in the microphone, telling the cameraman, you better be looking up. Angel and GQ Money, you're going to be going off that 30-foot tower, but to make sure you don't also miss what's going on in this thing. So that was one of my, as far as one of my proudest moments in XPW, I think that's one of my proudest matches, because nobody expected a lot of that match. I remember we were looking at the message boards, people were like, why are those two girls in it? They're going to ruin it. And it's a raw sewage match of all things. What are you going to really do with it? And in the end, the match was great. I loved the match. I mean, it was a fun match to do. Everybody performed top notch. I don't think there was one part or anything got messed up in that match. Everybody went and did everything they had to do, and the fans loved it. And then also the deathmatch tournament. Going back to that Vic Grimes and Jack scaffold match. I remember when they were talking about the deathmatch tournament. I had taken some crazy bumps early, couple months before. I think it was Genocide. I got thrown off the steel cage. It was 16-foot steel cage. They never got fully erected. It was falling apart up there. Yeah. And then I did the 30-foot sidewalk slam into the tables of crap. So I remember I was kind of getting a reputation of being this big bumper. Mm-hmm. I remember Rob was talking about this deathmatch tournament. We're going to do it the Baptized in Blood 3, or another deathmatch tournament. Yeah. And he brought up like the main event. The finish is going to be a scaffold match, and we were a few months shy from what Big Grimes and Jack had done. And when he mentioned that, he looks over at me and says, "You're going to be taking the bump off that scaffold," and I kind of didn't want to do it. And it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. I just felt that I didn't want to disrespect what Jack and Vic had done, because Vic almost killed himself in that spot. Right? Here we are doing it, 4 or 5 months later, without giving it letting it time to really give itself a due. Give it a year or so before you even think about doing something like that. I remember Rob got a little upset about me saying, "Oh," he goes, "What? You're you mean a little bitch? You don't want to do this?" Because Rob was not afraid to speak his mind on a lot of stuff. And it wasn't the fact that I didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to take away from what Vic had done in that match, 5 or 6 months prior. And when this legit, I know in wrestling things are very over exaggerated. To the fans, that legit was a 40-foot scaffold. When they did rent it, the guy says, we asked him, well, how big is it? Like, well, it's 40 feet. We're like, really? They're like, yeah, you guys said it was going to be a 40-foot scaffold. We got your 40-foot scaffold. So there was no line with how high this scaffold was. And during that tournament, I think at the Pico River Sports Arena, I think I was the first wrestler before the match started. I was the first wrestler to get to the arena that day early, and I get to the top, and I never got to see the one. I never got to the top, climb the top, the one Vic and New Jack did. So this is my first time actually climbing the thing, and they had learned the XPW higher ups kind of knew what they did wrong with the Vic Grimes and New Jack one. They knew maybe they could have higher tables. I think they ordered 12, and it was stacked three across, 4 high, and they ended up taping the legs together,
Right.
because they felt that to be a little more safer. And I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute too. So I get to the arena early, and I'm going up to the top of the scaffold. And I'm like, oh my god, this is high, like legit high. What I'm about to do. And the one mistake I did was never figuring out how I'm going to go off this scaffold. I knew this angle that they had came up with, which I think was a stupid angle. Do you remember how I ended up getting thrown off of it?
Do I remember the angle?
Yeah, it was a stupid angle. I don't know why they.
I remember you just going straight off, like from the center.
But do you remember Shane Douglas coming out with a dart gun?
Oh yeah.
He was somehow a marksman with a dart gun and was able to shoot me in the neck. Yeah. And that was supposed to make me like lose my balance or pass out, and I was going to take the bump. Right. So anyways, going back to this match, I do the deathmatch tournament. That was the first time I actually I used the actual moniker, the Hardcore Homo. I think I brought it up. And I remember doing the deathmatch tournament. It was me and GQ Money in the first round. And when I first went out there, all of a sudden the fans are chanting Hardcore Homo, Hardcore Homo. And it got loud. It was loud. I remember that deathmatch tournament had a lot of people in it. I mean, they were filled the rafters up with, the old school days, you would call it.
That was one of our biggest crowds, too. Yeah,
the crowds was loud. And it was an open arena. If anybody ever been to the Pico Sports Arena, it wasn't enclosed, so you don't hear a lot of the noise when you're in the middle of the ring. But you do hear it enough where you're knowing what they're saying, and they were chanting Hardcore Homo. So me and GQ Money did our match, and then I think my second match was against Pogo, and I think I'm one of the few people that actually ever pinned Pogo legit. Pogo never lost. Pogo really never lost. So in the match, Pogo, and then here comes the third round. It was me and Supreme, and I'm going to the top, and we're doing our stuff, and Supreme never went to the top to go check that scaffold out, and so I'm going to the top, and remember there was a guy named Devin. They had him up there also. So Devin's up there with the camera. He's sitting down.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I'm walking up the scaffolding. I get up onto the top, and he's there, and I see him there. And it's the middle. It's very late because XPW shows used to go very late at night because they would never start on time. And I'm going to the top, and Supreme gets up there, and for some reason the wind was blowing that day. And mind you, this is an open arena, so of course you're feeling the wind. And that scaffolding up on top is swaying a little bit. And one thing you probably don't know about Supreme is Supreme was very brave in what he did, but he did not like heights that much. And so when he's up there, he tries to stand up, and the scaffold's swaying a little bit, and I'm trying to get up, and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to do some spots. Maybe you're going to slam me. We're going to tease like a power bomb, and I'll do some stuff. I forgot what we came up with. And the scaffold starts swaying because the wind's getting hard, and we're up there. Man. And I remember he's on all fours, and he says, I can't get up. I can't get up, because the fear is obviously in him. And he knows he's not going off. I'm going off. So it wasn't the fact that he's going to jump, take the bump. Right. So I'm going up there, and I'm like, okay, well, we got to do something. So I think I ended up hitting him and using the chair, and I forgot what I did. It's been a while since I saw that match. And then I remember Shane Douglas coming out. I'm looking for him through the side of my eye, way up to 40 feet. I see him come out, and I see him do the shooting of I think it was like a dart gun, or I think it was a legit paintball gun. And here I go. And remember I told you I never figure how I'm going to go off the scaffolding, right? So I'm looking up there. I'm like, okay, here I'm about to go off. So I kind of like, okay, how am I going to do this? That's what all of a sudden hit me. Like, how am I going to go off the scaffolding and make it look legit? I mean, not that the fact that I'm getting hit by a dart, is supposed to knock me out, supposed to do it. But I'm up there, and I'm like, shit, how am I supposed to do this? So I stick one foot over, and I'm like, shit, I go off like this. I'm like, no, that looks ridiculous. And Supreme's like, you got to go down. You got to go. You got to go. I'm like, I know, but I don't know how I'm supposed to do this without making it look good. He's like, you got to go. I'm like, I know. So I get my foot back on the scaffolding, over the scaffolding rails, and I'm up there. I'm like, shit, I got to think of something. So he says, listen, I'm going to grab you by your shirt and I'm just going to pull you. You got to go. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. So he grabs me by the shirt like this and he says, ready? And he just pulls me. I remember just closing my eyes and just taking and I'm going down. And remember how he said they taped the legs together to prevent what happened with Grimes for the tables flying out? So I'm falling, and this legit was 40 feet. Okay, so I'm falling, and I'm like, man, these tables are not coming up anytime soon. So I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm missing. I'm doing another Vic here because I took the whole just forward bump, you know, and close. You're looking up at the scaffolding, but I have my eyes closed, so I'm not really seeing the distance between me and the scaffolding, you know, leaving me. And all of a sudden, I hit the first table, and it wasn't that bad. It did hurt. Don't get me wrong, that shit hurt. Yeah. But because they had taped all the legs together, none of those tables had anywhere to go. So I broke the first layer, and when you break a table, they shatter, and they're very jagged. Yeah. So the first layer hits, and I remember hitting it. I'm like, oh, and I lost my breath, obviously. And it was so fast. I hit the second layer, but the more layers I do remember hitting, because it was slowing me down little by little, those jagged pieces got worse and worse. They had nowhere to go, and they were just scraping the hell out of my back. I mean, it was probably one of the worst. It was worse than barbed wire. It was worse than glass. I mean, these are jagged pieces of particle board. They were just scraping the hell out of my back. And back then, I think I used to wear the pajamas, so they were very light. There was no protection on it. And I'm scraping every single one of these tables because they had taped the legs together. These tables have nowhere to go but just continuously break my fall. So I'm going down, and I'm screaming because I'm in legit pain. I don't remember ever hearing the explosions going off, but I did feel the heat.
Wow.
I remember I'm laying down there, and I'm just screaming. I'm like, because this thing hurts like a motherfucker. I'm just like, oh my God, get me the hell out of here. And finally was able to come to my senses a little bit. I'm like feeling okay. I can feel my legs. I can feel my arms. I can move myself. I think I'm okay. But at that point, I mean, even with the adrenaline, just the pain of those tables just breaking and scraping me up was horrible. So they ended up cutting all the tables away, and they ended up grabbing a table that wasn't broken, used that kind of as, of course, they would use that as a stretcher because they didn't have legit stretchers back then for us to use. And they carted me off, and I get to the back, and I remember everybody's giving me a standing ovation in the back. And, you know, everybody comes and hugs me, but I don't want to be hugged because I'm in so much pain from those tables. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. And everybody's like, are you okay? And there was a couple of the female wrestlers and a couple of female fans used to be backstage, and they're crying, obviously, because they weren't sure if I was legit hurt or not. And I'm like, no, I'm good. So I'm the one comforting them, even though they're the ones, you know, I should be the one getting comfort.
Funny.
And I'm like, okay, well, fuck it. Here, I'm done with this match. And then in the locker room at the Pico River Sports Arena, there's a shower. And mind you, we just have a deathmatch tournament. I walk in the shower because I'm done with the match. The adrenaline's starting to subside in me. You know, I'm starting to feel all of the crazy things I did through that tournament. You know, I'm looking around. I got all kinds of scars. I'm like, fuck, this thing hurts. This hurts. I walk in the bathroom. It's all full of just blood and water because everybody had taken a shower to clean themselves off. I turn on the shower. I take off all my clothes. Close the door. And then I get in the shower. And if anybody's ever gotten a deep cut, and when water hits you, it wakes you up. And oh my God, I went through the pain all over again because as soon as that water hit me, I was screaming in the shower because all of those tables was just like road rash. I don't know if anybody ever knows what road rash is, but it was like road rash all on my back, on my arms, anywhere that those tables had nowhere to go. It just scraped the hell out of me. And for years and years and years, my back looked like all scarred up. You know, it was completely scarred up, and it was because of that one those tables, because they were trying to protect me. It ended up hurting me more.
Well, I mean, I guess ultimately the scratches were part of this thing that protected you from possibly like landing hard, but it came with a price. And look, as even just as not a fan, but someone that's working back there, like I never would have guessed that that's what got you which was with the tables, like being all splintered up, and you just wouldn't even think that, so that's something new to me, and I'm sure obviously if it's new to me, then it's got to be new to everyone that's listening here. But
you know what, I just remembered,
mhm.
remember I told you how crazy fans, one day, I think it's when we came back to LA after Philadelphia,
Yeah,
a man comes up to me and he has this broken table. And he says, "Here, Angel," he goes, "I want to give this to you." I'm like, "What is it?" I knew it was a broken table, but I'm like, what is this? And he's like, he goes, "Well, when you did that deathmatch tournament," he goes, "I ended up sneaking in the ring and grabbing a piece of table because obviously they're trying to get rid of it." And he gave me a piece, and somewhere in my room, I saved it. I don't know where it is, but I do have that piece of broken table to remind me of that deathmatch tournament.
That's great. Yeah, and you don't think about it in the moment to keep little things like that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I see all the scars I have on my body that reminds me of it, but that little piece of table will remind me forever of that deathmatch tournament.
So that was, thanks for sharing, man, because that was, again, I think that gets a little overlooked, like you said, when you talk about extreme memories in XPW of like, I mean, look, the what you call it, Vice TV showcase the New Jack Big Grimes. I mean, people are still talking about that to this day. As it falls in the top 10 craziest stunts in the history of the sport of professional wrestling, and that was XPW. So,
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, how nobody ever died in XPW is amazing. I mean, do you know all the crazy stories that ever happened? I mean, we want to talk about some backstage stuff.
Yeah, if we oh my gosh, dude, forget wrestling. Like, I almost got killed in the office, man. There were some henchmen that came in and they were looking for somebody, and I was sleeping when we were doing XPW TV, and I was taking a nap, and then they left apparently, and I woke up and no one was in the office, and I go in to Rob's office and I see Tom Byron come up with a pistol, like, are they gone? I'm like, who? And so like there were some weird, crazy moments, and remember, I don't know if you
remember when Johnny Webb got blown up in the
I was just gonna bring that up. And it was like,
that was
how the
fake.
hell did
we didn't have Johnny Webb in there? Whoever's bright idea, we had no stunt coordinators in XPW, and for some reason they thought, maybe it's a bright idea to get some kerosene, I think they used, and throw it inside the closed dumpster with the lids closed. And then Johnny Webb was going to, I believe Johnny Webb was going to light it or something, but they don't realize when the lids closed.
Lou Cypher and Tool wrote it.
When the lids closed, there's nowhere for those fumes to go,
I know.
And they ended up throwing it in. And the reason it cut so short off is because Wantastico told me the story because he actually saw it live. He says nobody expected it to blow up like it did. And Johnny Webb legit was in that trash can when it happened.
He was in there.
He said car alarms going off blocks away. You hear car alarms.
Man.
It took the place so much that
I got there that night after it happened, shortly after it happened, and like I just saw the aftermath and was like, wait, what? And I remember they showed me the raw footage. I was like, holy, how are you not dead, man? And Webb in the classic, like, I don't know, or whatever. But
or I mean, Supreme getting almost burnt to death.
Yeah,
New Jack almost getting burnt to death.
And man, don't forget all like again the Philadelphia. Let's go into Philly right now because you talked about you're talking about these big stunts and these big bumps and all that. Like you weren't necessarily been thrown off something extraordinarily high up in comparison to, like, let's say the scaffold matches, but like the one bump you took at our very first show in Philadelphia called XPW's Hostile Takeover, you got thrown off of the balcony there, but there was, like you said, in the ring with the scaffold, they stacked tables to slow your fall down. You got thrown up by Supreme at the balcony, and it wasn't like down to the next level. It was down to the concrete floor, and you barely hit like one of the two tables set up, And I remember, like, you barely touched it. It broke, but you barely touched it. You basically got thrown off of that balcony onto your back on that concrete. We were talking to Luke Hawks on a previous episode of Xtreme Memories here on the Wrestling Chatter channel. And we had him on as a guest, and he brought you up saying, like, if anyone is, like, amazing how you're still walking and what you're doing and how you're coping to this day is nothing short of extraordinary and a miracle. Because again, you just, it's not just the light bulbs and all the weaponry and all that. You literally, like, you're landing that, like a Hollywood stuntman, if he came off of the height you were coming off, there would easily be an air balloon down below for him to land in. And you look at Hostile Takeover, folks. If you haven't seen it for a while, if you've never seen it, check out XPW Hostile Takeover and check out the match between Angel and Supreme. A great match, by the way, just top to bottom. It was a fantastic match. And but look at that spot at the end where Angel here gets power bombed off of that balcony, and you could see there's no give, nothing. You just basically go from the balcony to concrete on your back, and it's like, I got to sit here and ask you, how were you able to do half of those things? Because I'm asking you as the announcer, but even a guy like Luke Hawks, who's been through the ringer, he sits there in awe to this day and in wonder and awe that, and also stuff when I was talking to Ryan Katz, GQ Money, who you guys worked very well together, by the way. I'm going to get into that when we talk about Cold Day in Hell, but you guys worked well together, but even he and others, everybody talks in high regard that, like, how is this guy still living, let alone walking? You know what I mean? So, I mean, what's the secret?
I guess luck, really.
I guess so. Yeah.
You know what? Till this day, actually, I'm very healthy. I have no.
Yeah.
I can wake up. You know, I love exercising now. Probably better shape than I am now than I was when I was wrestling.
You look the same, man. You look the same.
And mind you, Angel will always be 19, but but John Chavez is 41. Okay,
got it.
As of right now, knock on wood, I have no pain or ill effects from what I did in wrestling.
Well, well, that's good.
I'm one of
that's
the luckiest
man.
motherfuckers ever, because for what I did, and I remember I was probably in my early 20s back then when I did this stuff. And
yeah,
when you're
in
your 20s, you don't think you could, you don't think anything's ever going to bad happen to you. And the last XPW show we did before it all closed down, I did miss the table. We'll probably go back to that in Pittsburgh. And I did legit get hurt in that one. But if we go back to the Philadelphia one, obviously we're doing a deathmatch tournament, and it's me and Supreme. I mean, it's not a deathmatch tournament. It's just a deathmatch. It's me and Supreme. We're going at it, and we're thinking to ourselves, man, we gotta somehow. Nobody wants us here. Nobody wants us in Philadelphia. You know, we left our fans in LA, so we're not going to have really any support. We're going to be in enemy territory here, and we're thinking to ourselves, what is it we're going to have to do to get these fans to enjoy what we do and show them that we really do want to be here. We want to do whatever we have to do to entertain you guys, and hopefully you'll give us a chance, because I don't know if we knew we were going to keep doing the XPW shows there. I know Rob had bought the building, and so we kind of understood we were going to stay in Philadelphia for a little bit. But I don't know what the true plan was.
So when we moved to Philly, I remember, I don't know if this was the plan in the very beginning when he bought the arena, but this is how I found out, because one of the worst moments in my career was when Rob just like basically marked out, and Shane too. And Shane and I are close now. Like, we really didn't have a falling out or anything, but he and I worked together on a pilot that never went anywhere a few years back with Roddy Piper weeks before he died, unfortunately. So Shane and I are cool. But at the time, man, they brought in another good friend of mine who I'm still tight with, is Joey Styles, when they brought him in to replace me. So I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know. And I think they were just caught up in the moment, and they didn't tell me. And that was devastating, because not only because it was my spot, but I gave, like, I'm all in, like I'm dedicated, and they knew that too. So at first, I don't think they knew it was going to happen, but this was the plan shortly before Joey Styles left. So we were doing XPW TV, and it was like I was remote from Los Angeles. You had Joey from New York, and then you had can't remember her name now, but it was a woman correspondent from London, right? But it was just a friend of Tom Byron, I believe. But anyway, so we were going to do what was going to happen eventually. It never took place. But what was going to happen, Joey came in and basically was doing all the play-by-play. And I was doing like the Sean Mooney, Mean Gene role. Okay, whatever type thing. It's fine. You know, shit happens and you got to roll with it, right? So eventually the plan was we were going to do shows both LA and New York. He was going to do the East Coast matches. I was going to call the West Coast matches. And eventually we were going to call matches together on XPW pay-per-view. So that was the goal. That was the goal. And you know, Joey unfortunately left. We only had one pay-per-view, which was a highlight reel. But I really look forward to that at the time, to he and I calling matches together. And we sense our friends, you know, so it's funny how those things happen. You know, you have a little bit of a conflict, but then it brings you maybe closer together after the fact. So yeah, there was definitely an unknown factor. Are we going to stay on the East Coast? But eventually, yes, we were going to coincide and do both.
So back to what we were talking about earlier about how we were in enemy territory because we weren't sure what we were going to do. So me and Supreme were trying to figure out an idea what we're going to do. And so we're like, well, what could we really do? So we ended up, mind you, this was our first time ever in the ECW arena. I'm going to always call it the ECW arena. I forgot what it was called back then.
Viking Hall.
Viking Hall or something.
Viking Hall.
And we're like, well, what if we go off that scaffolding? I think it wasn't scaffolding. Sorry, it was a balcony that sat right above the concession stand.
Yep.
We're like, why don't we do some kind of crazy spot off of that balcony there? And we're like, well, so we go up there. We end up getting a ladder, really big ladder going up and seeing it. And we found out that it couldn't support our weight. So Supreme, who was somewhat of a handyman, ended up getting some stuff from Home Depot. And actually, we're building our torture chamber here because he's trying to build something so we can both stand on it and not legit, break through the thing. Because, Rob owned the building. We didn't want to crash to the concession stand. So the original plan that people do not know was me and Supreme were supposed to do that. He was supposed to do a sit-out powerbomb together with me off that scaffold. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, early in the match, I ended up breaking my ankle. The only thing that kept me going was the adrenaline. I think I bitched out on a move, and it was my fault. I was supposed to jump over the top rope, and the Supreme was going to move, and I was going to land in barbed wire, and it probably wouldn't have been way worse, but because I chickened out, I ended up kind of catching the rope and trying to hold on to it too longer than I should have, and I ended up catching my foot in the barbed wire. My foot stood because of barbed wire. The trick to barbed wire that people don't know is the more you have, the less it hurts. It's like a bed of nails.
Right. It's like a cushion.
If you have enough, it actually becomes like a spring.
Yeah.
And there's so much of it, you really don't feel it as much.
Right. And
because we did so much barbed wire, I ended up going feet first, my first hit, and my foot got caught in the barbed wire, and it had nowhere to go, and my body fell a different way. So I ended up going over the top rope, chickening out just a little bit. I think it held the rope. You'll see me kind of hold on to it. My foot hit one way, and all that barbed wire held my foot in place, and my body went the other way. And what ended up giving out was my ankle, luckily, not my knee, but it was my ankle. But I did probably break it because it took well over 7 months to heal. I never really went to the doctor for it.
Oh, man.
So the only thing that kept me going was the adrenaline. So in the match, I wasn't able to really – towards the end, you start seeing me wobble it around a little bit. So I'm going up the ladder. And by that time, the adrenaline starting to wear off, even though I knew what I was about to do. So I'm climbing up the ladder and – I was never one to ever, anybody that knows in wrestling term, you always want to try to get light for your opponent. And I was never. I was always. They would always make fun of me, say Angel is probably the worst person to get up for you. That I have bricks for feet, or cinder blocks for feet. And the fact that I had a broken ankle, I was not able to really get up for Supreme because Supreme was going to pick me up. And mind you, we are in the end of a death match, so we're both kind of just blown up and hurt and bleeding all over the place. The Supreme wasn't able to fully get me up to do the sit-out power bomb because he was going to go off it together, and we were just going to do a sit-out power bomb off for that. So for some reason, you see him kind of force me up in there and let me go. And luckily, the way I went down, the angle was my ass came down first because the way he picked me up. If he actually would have gave me a legit power bomb, it wouldn't have ended well. But because my ass came down first, I ended up hitting the tables, and the tables were like this. And here's my ass, and I ended up hitting both tables, but one table did separate, and it did break. And in the footage, you'll see because there was barbed wire and light tubes. And one of the light tubes ended up going right by my crotch area. Luckily, it never get any closer. But it ended up going straight up, breaking that way. I come down, and it wasn't that bad. I mean, I think the height itself was probably about 15 or 16 feet at the most. But mind you, you're going off.
I would say at least that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the ladder itself was 12 just to get to the balcony. But then there was also. Right. To get on the balcony, you're a little higher, but then we had to get on the ledge that the balcony had just to get
you might have been right about 20 feet. You might have been right about 20.
Yeah, so here I am going off this thing, and back then, you're young, you don't think you're going to get hurt, and luckily I didn't get hurt that day. But the tables ended up separating. I was fine. I ended up breaking my ankle. That was probably the only injury, and I remember Terry Funk was there that day. He was in the main event.
Yeah, great match where he legit cut himself. Yeah.
They ended up carrying me to the back, and I remember Terry Funk just looks at me and says, "Angel," he goes, "Oh my God." I forgot he said something like, he goes, "Man, that's one of the craziest things I ever saw anybody ever do," or something like that. And
wow.
Terry Funk just said that to me, like little Mark and me was like, wow.
Of course, man.
Don't ever mark out to stars, dude.
Yeah, but okay, so you don't show yourself. You just you politely say thank you.
Yeah, I said thank you, Terry,
but you also know how important and awesome that is, and that's not being a mark at that point because as long as you conduct yourself professionally in the back, you can still in your own mind mark out if you want to call it that, but. It's no different than like if you're playing pickup ball and like Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson walk in and give you a compliment, So it's no different,
And I mean, to this day, I mean, that's probably one of my favorite death matches I ever had. And I guess I got typecasted into death matches because I was the hardcore homo. But really, I didn't have many death matches. But the ones I did have were always crazy.
Yeah, they stood out. They
really stood out. So a lot of people think I did some crazy stuff in my career, but I really didn't have a lot of death matches.
But the thing is, the few you did have, like I said, they stick out and they are memorable. And
I mean, I don't know if you can see it on camera. There's a scar right. I believe it's here. You may not be able to see it in here, but there's a legit scar right here in Philadelphia. There's a commissioner, and you weren't allowed to blade yourself in Philadelphia. That was the rule. And mind you, we were in enemy territory, so the commissioner was somewhat not on our side because of what we were doing. So they were really watching us. So one thing we had to do was because obviously in a death match you're going to blade, but we couldn't do it ourselves because the commissioner, is watching us, and of course somebody's going to say, "Well, this is how they're going to do it, so you better watch it." So I had to let Supreme blade me, and you'll see him get a broken piece of light bulb, stick it in my head, and his fingers he has a piece of blade, and he sticks it in my head, and I didn't feel it when he first did it, and I ended up turning my head like this, and when I did, it just went, and all of a sudden, all this blood just starts rushing out because I never felt the blood go in me, and I have a big old scar luckily it's in my hairline, but there's a big old scar that's leading right down here. So I'm bloodied up. My ankle's broken. Funny story. So I ended up, first time in Philadelphia, I ended up me and Supreme were always, whenever somehow we'd ever be out in another state where we had to fly in, we were always roommates in the hotels. So I ended up carpooling with him to the airport that morning. I left my car at his apartment out in where was he living at? Burbank back then. And I live in LA.
And where?
So, yeah, I was living in LA, so I parked my car in Burbank by his apartment. His wife ended up dropping us off at the airport when we first did that show. So here I am, and back to my. I'll talk to about my scar in a bit. Well, the guys never. I guess they had medical personnel there, but they didn't bring any stitches. So I ended up telling them, dude, you got to do something because it's legit. Just keeps bleeding because it's so big and deep.
Yikes.
So I'm like, do you have any super glue or anything? Because Sabu does that stuff. They're like, yeah. So they ended up getting somebody had super glue in the bag. They ended up getting super glue, and the guy's like, oh, he goes, man, you're crazy what you're doing, And he puts super glue, and all of a sudden that stuff starts dripping down my face.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh my God, if anything you know about super glue, it kind of dries the instant.
Right.
So I have dried super glue all kind of by my eyebrow. Luckily, it doesn't go in my eye. And I'm trying to pick it away. I have dry blood. My eyebrow is missing hair because obviously the way the dry.
For sure.
Glue out of there. I ended up flying back to I don't remember if we flew we flew to LAX. Ended up flying back to LA. I have a broken ankle. Okay. I have dried super glue all in my face. I have a legit scar, big old scar. I'm beat up. I ended up hobbling down. Supreme lived on the second floor, so I had to go upstairs for some reason.
Yeah, I remember.
I come back down, and it was during that time was a very hot day. It must have been summer. And I'm, if you ever had a broken ankle, you really are going to lose.
I've had one. The worst. Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, man, what am I doing to myself? But it was a fun match. It was having fun, Anybody's ever been? Why should I get back to the story? Anybody's ever been flown on an airplane knows what happens to your lower extremities when you're up in a high pressure. It kind of makes things big. So you shouldn't really be flying with a broken ankle, especially the one that's
I actually had to miss a funeral, family funeral, my grandfather, and I could not go. He was in Washington State, and I felt horrible and all that. I guess I still feel horrible. Everyone understands though, and all that, but I could not go because I just broke my ankle, which I still have metal in my foot. So yeah, there's just, you can't, because you could, people have died, and it's fairly common, and people die of blood clots when they fly, if they're in that sort of condition. So I get it, man. Like, geez, I can't believe you.
I had to pretty much take the shoelaces off my shoe because my ankle had swollen so much. I couldn't move it. It's swollen because I'm in the airport. Like I said, we get back to Supreme's apartment. I go upstairs. I'm hobbling myself up, and I'm trying to be manly and not have anybody help me out. I'm bringing down my suitcase, and I'm trying to hold myself together. And I'm about to lose my balance, and I put my hand on top of my car. And mind you, it's summertime. And anybody that lives in LA and never actually had to touch the top of a car knows how hot those days can get. I ended up burning my hand on my car. I get up, and I finally sit down, and at that point, I just snap. I just start saying, fuck, and I'm going crazy because I'm like, at that point, whatever was left in me just finally made me just snap. That was the last thing that broke my spirit, and I said, I'm done.
And knowing you, like you're really one of the last people that kind of like goes AWOL or anything. You always were kind of calm, cool, collected, held yourself together. So yeah, for you to do that, unbelievable. Well, you know what? Coming back from Philadelphia now, Angel, we're gonna wrap things up here, but I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Talk before we close it out though. Talk a little bit about. I was mentioning earlier that you and I found that you and GQ Money really, for whatever reason, you guys work very well together in your matches. The psychology, the storyline. And I was telling Ryan GQ on a previous episode of Xtreme Memories that I was a huge fan of your guys' work at XPW's reunion show in 2008. XPW's Cold Day in Hell, May 24th of '08, Redondo Beach.
My birthday.
And that was it. Yeah. So I was going to ask you about that. That legitimately was your birthday, where ring announcer Guido came out, gave you a cake. And then, so the storyline was legitimately May 24th, your birthday. And then the storyline was, you guys, we don't have too much time to get into every detail, but talk a little bit about like the intricacies of that match, because it was basically, for those of you who haven't seen it, and again, YouTube, check out Cold Day in Hell. The whole show is up on YouTube, with the exception, I believe, the Miss Extreme contest and like the Dynamite D Battle Royal for some reason isn't in there, but everything else is in there on YouTube. And GQ Money versus Angel, it was great. It was like David Blaine meets David Copperfield meets Extreme Wrestling, and it was and Smiley Ryan was working with a magician. So I mean, talk about working the audience, and there was no such thing as a smart Mark or smart us, because I wasn't privy to what was going to happen. So that's again why I was such a big fan of it. Like it got me, it worked me, and I was applauding you guys because it really worked, and you guys executed it well too. Just because you guys have the plan and the magic tricks are in place doesn't mean it's gonna be executed correctly, but you guys made sure it was executed right. I know there was a little bit of help on editing, which Smiley brought up.
We always knew going into this match, the live crowd may not get what we're doing, but it was really going to be. It was going to be whoever ordered the DVD or watched it on television. They were going to understand, because you as a commentator were going to narrate what we were doing in the match and understand it. Because the live crowd is seeing an unedited piece. And mind you, we didn't edit up the match a lot.
That's it. You're right. Because Smiley even brought up, like, there was only one part where he had to run around the ring and get there in a certain amount of time, and that took longer than it seemed legitimate. So that was almost the only thing that was edited. Other than that, like, everybody, when he came out as the cameraman, and it was really him because he got like thrown to the back and then like going down out of the stage. Good stuff, dude. And
I mean, even bringing in Rosano, bringing people. Because I remember when I brought Rosano out.
It was nice to see him. It was nice to see him.
But he looks so different. Some of the fans didn't even recognize him.
I know.
I'm like, Rosano, I go, you got to do something, because these fans don't really know who you are. And
but he goes, was so limited.
Yeah. And then you hear some fan go, I think that's Steve Rosano.
Right. Like, and I remember on commentary, I tried to put it over as best I could. Like, it's still, Steve Rosano, booyah. Because, we all wanted everybody to get that spot on that show. Yeah. It meant so much. And then the fans turned in like
crack. Remember that?
Yeah, we brought We
paid homage to Miss Elizabeth and Macho Man Randy Savage.
Right. High up, one of the great couples in the history.
Yeah, we paid homage to them. Where WrestleMania 7.
Right.
I mean, that match was never really meant to be really serious. We always knew going in there it was a rubber match. All the promos leading up to it was kind of funny and, tongue in cheek on what we were doing with it, So it was never really meant to be a serious match. We were just going to have fun.
Yeah, I remember they wanted, like, when you guys embraced, it was, what was that song from Dirty Dancing? Well,
yeah, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, I was going to be like, who are you? I was going to be Macho Man, kind of be like, why? Because he came out and attacked, who was Cooper?
Brawling Bo Cooper.
Brawling Bo Cooper, GQ Money, and I forgot who else was out there. And
so Crack came back. Yeah, Crack came back out, and you guys were reunited. They wanted to play that song.
He put me on his shoulder like Macho Man, but unfortunately, it was very tongue in cheek on what we did.
Oh yeah,
we didn't take it serious. I mean, we took it serious on the wrestling match part, but we didn't take it serious for enough where we're like, okay, we knew that this wasn't a crazy feud. It had been 10 years since we really wrestled each other, because it was the 10-year anniversary. Cold Day in Hell. So it wasn't like something crazy we had to like take serious on this whole thing.
Right.
It was just a match that we had each gotten a couple of wins, and I gotten a couple of wins. So this was going to be the rubber match to seal it all.
So that, and that was it. That was 2 out of 3, because each one of you won in the original XPW, and then the rubber match. Who ended up getting the win? It was GQ Money, I believe.
Money,
But that was again part of his magic trick and all that. So that was a great performance. And again, I urge fans, look, if you want to talk about psychology and kind of like going against the grain in pro wrestling, that match solidified it right there. Like it was different, and that again stood out to me, and it was executed very well. Before we wrap up, Angel, talk a little bit about. I know you talked about Supreme, Dynamite D, but any parting words, any tributes to those two that you could, any stories, something you could share because sorely missed, and D's been gone for a while, but look, his name is brought up often still to this day, and of course we unfortunately just recently lost Supreme a couple months ago. But talk a little bit about them, and then we'll close it out because it's been great talking to you. And I also want to talk to you about what you're doing now, and also the next generation you're training at Santino's. So if you want to you want to put that all in there, best you want to.
So, like you said, D's been gone quite a while. I do remember getting the phone call. We knew he had cancer. When we were getting the phone call, I was with one of my friends who was a great XPW fan, and when I told him that I just got the call that D had died, it was very devastating to us. We talked for hours and hours and hours right that night about what was going on, because we had a whole hope he would pull through. D was amazing. I mean, D, for anybody that doesn't know D was always willing to use anything he had is his knowledge to help you out. He actually gave me the bathhouse bomb. He came up with it.
Wow.
For those who don't know, remember what my old finisher used to be. He's the one that said, "Hey, I gotta have a finisher for you." I'm like, "Well, what is it?" He's like, "Well, I was thinking about, why don't you try this, and why don't you get on the second rope and flip and try to do an inverted senton?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of a cool idea." So me and him worked on it, and he ended up giving me the bathhouse bomb. But D was always willing. I mean, he was the head trainer of the asylum. He was always willing to use his wrestling knowledge and to teach a younger generation. But he was always in a joking mood, even when he wasn't. When he was kind of pissed off, and it goes back to a story that I did tell at the Santinos when we were doing tributes for D when he first died. When he had died, but we're going to do those memorial shows for him. And one of the stories I do remember D talking about, and it's a funny story. The way it goes is GQ Money and Chaos were going to TNA, and we took them to Vegas. As far as me and D went out there to meet them, and they were going to go from Vegas, and they were going to live out in Tennessee. So we drove out with them to Vegas. We celebrated one big time, and they were leaving. And we were coming back. I don't remember who else was with us. I want to say it was might have been. God, I can't remember who it was now. There was somebody else with us. And I remember
was it Scott?
It might have been Scott. I can't remember who it was now, though. But anyways, we're coming back, and there's an outlet by Vegas. And we're in the outlets, we're checking it out because, they had just left. And we're checking it out. And whoever I was with them. And all of a sudden, D comes back, and he's pissed off. He's, like, legit pissed. And he had this white shirt on, but there's this crazy, like, brown stain on him. And we're like, D, what's going on? He's like, man, I just got hit by Tito Santana. And he's like, but he's pissed. Like, he's legit pissed. And we're like, what the hell are you talking about, D? He's like, no, I just got hit by Tito Santana. I'm like, B, what are you talking about? Because he's, like I said, he wants to fight. He's like, well, here I am. I'm going through the shopping center, and all of a sudden, it was an outdoor shopping center. I guess all of a sudden the car pulled up. Somebody rolled down their windows and threw a burrito at him. So D, being the mark he is, got hit by the flying burrito. Right. And it got on his shirt. The guys drove off, and he's coming back. And normally somebody would go after those guys and try to break whatever. But he comes back and he's screaming. He's pissed off, but he has to put a wrestling term by saying he got hit by Tito Santana's flying burrito.
Dude, I was talking to Joey, and I'll mention this again, but when we went to visit him in the hospital just before he passed, it was like we were going into the hospital room and we're trying to gear ourselves up to be positive around D. And it was very hard to do. So I come in there, whoever else, Patrick Hernandez was there. and D was laying in the bed, but he had some IV in his arm or medication that he was taking that made him all swelled up in different parts of his body. So his arm, his bicep was just swelled up from the medicine. So here, like he's the one that we're supposed to be cheering up. And then we come in and he goes, now I got the 24-inch pythons, brother.
Yeah,
and it's
always.
like he's making us all laugh. I'll never forget that, man. Like here, he's like, he wants us to feel good while he's basically dying. And that really kind of, dude, I know, like I said, I know it's been a long time since he's been gone, but dude, these things get the chills just talking about it right now. So shout out to D, shout out to Lester and
then
their
Lester.
families,
I mean, Lester and I, in XPW, we, even though we feuded, we were always roommates. We did some crazy stuff to each other, but anytime we would be put together in a match, they would always room us together. And we, mind you, I'm very straight edge. I probably can think of only 5 times I've ever drank in my whole life. I never smoked.
I remember
really
that.
did drugs. Those 5 times, out of respect, have always been with Supreme, because I legit respected Supreme. There would have not been a Hardcore Homo Angel without Supreme. I mean, me and him were like Batman and Joker, any other 2 combos you could put together.
Right.
That what we did together in that ring was amazing stuff. I mean, it sucks because I haven't seen Supreme in a long time. I think the last time I saw him was at a Lucha Vavoom show. He was a guest with Damien 666 and brought him in. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I seen Supreme. This is before he might have been having his health issues, but he wasn't really showing the. I know he lost a lot of weight, but he still looks like Supreme to me. And
that's cool.
Even though we hadn't seen each other for a while, we talked like the old days. We were there for hours after the show because back and down there, these after the Lucha Vavoom show, everybody just talking around, and we got together and we just talked like it was the old days, like we didn't see each other. We hadn't seen each other for years. One of the things that I always remember is the not the Cold Day in Hell. What was the other show that we did at the
XPW 10, XPW
exactly.
X, which was Roman numeral X. XPW
they asked
10.
him to do a death match, and they asked him to do a death match, and I forgot who originally was the original plan to do it, but it ended up falling through. And at that point, I really didn't want to do death matches anymore. I was kind of over them. I kind of got typecasted in them. I didn't really feel like doing them. My mindset wasn't on that crazy stuff anymore. Even though I loved watching them, I didn't really want to be participating in them. But Kevin calls me up and says, "Hey," he goes, "How would you like to work with Supreme?" I'm like, he goes, and I told Kevin, I go, "Kevin, I really don't want to do death matches anymore." I go, "I'm not really into it." And I told him why, and he understood. He goes. So he gets back to Supreme, and then Supreme, I don't know if he calls me up and because he had my number, he calls me up and we talk for a little bit. He goes, "Listen," he goes, "I will not do this match unless I know you're involved." He goes, "I can trust you." He goes, "I know that whatever we do in that ring is gonna, even though we hadn't wrestled for years, it's gonna be something memorable, And mind you, we didn't have a place to go over the matches like we used to do back in the old XPW, Asylum days. So I'm like, I really don't want to do Supreme. He goes, "Well, listen," he goes, "and I'm not going to do it either because he goes, me and you, we feuded and we, I helped him as much as he helped me, but I think he helped me more. And out of respect, much like those 5 times I've ever drank in my life, because I respected Supreme so much, I said, "Listen, if you Supreme, I will do this match." But that's how much I had respect for Supreme, because here's a guy who went out and did everything he possibly could for the fans. I mean, he got burnt. Remember when he got thrown off the ladder and he had that crazy light in his arm? I mean, the craziest injuries I ever saw was with Supreme. This is a guy who truly was what XPW was all about. He was a guy that he went out there, he was going to make sure that you were going to get your money's worth with him. And that's why the fans loved him. That's why I respected him, because of what the crazy stuff he did, And he was a good friend. I mean, we would hang out, and even though, he understood I didn't drink, he never really forced me to, but there was a few times I said, Supreme, pour me one, because, and he'd be like, what? Really? I'm like, yeah. I go, come on, Supreme,
Very
and,
cool.
he would. It sucks because I hadn't seen him for many years, and I wish I was around, But mind you, a lot of us just kind of fade away. Kris, I hadn't seen. Once again, I think I just recently saw you at a Lucha Vavoot show. Maybe what?
And
like
that was
ago?
that was like a year or two ago, and I came with a friend who, not wrestling related. He works at KLOS, and he had tickets, and he's, have you ever heard about this? I'm like, yes, I've heard about it. I can probably introduce you to half the people there, and then yeah.
I hadn't seen you for a long time.
Right.
We as wrestlers sometimes just especially me, because I'm kind of semi-retired now from it. Other than Ding Vavoom, I really don't wrestle as much anymore, so I'm kind of out of the scene. I know Supreme for a while was out of the scene, so we had kind of drifted apart. But every time we got together and we saw each other, it was like old days. It was like being back in those hotel rooms, just talking about old stories. And he Supreme was Supreme. I love Supreme. Supreme was Supreme was always willing to have you down at his house for some crazy groovy parties. But to know Supreme, you would never know that he did that crazy stuff either. He was a monster.
He was a tank, a monster and a tank, and
but
until you
when he was your friend,
right? And once you got to know Lester, then you oh wow, I know there's a lot of Supreme in Lester, but there's still a difference, and like I got to know him the most when we sat next to each other on a plane ride back from Philly, and that was the first time I really got to know him. And it was like everything was a little bit different between us after that. Not that there wasn't any, ill will or nothing like that. But now it was like, it was just something I can't explain. It was just, we're closer and understood. Hey, we're here. We're a team. He said once, like, yeah, man, you're only the announcer, man, but you're our announcer. Like, and I remember he said that, and I was like, I'll take that as a compliment, man. So, but hey, talk a little bit about, before we close it out, Angel, talk about what you're doing now and training the next generation over at Santino Bros Wrestling Academy.
Joey's school is a great school, but I haven't been there for quite a while. I don't really live anywhere near it anymore.
You were training there for quite some time.
But I was when they started out, when they first started out bringing someone. A lot of wrestlers are still kind of wrestling now, active today. I was there in the early days when they were starting out. It was great because Santino started kind of like Slammers. They used the same premises Slammers had. I mean, going out there, doing a little more old school, just beating the guys down to show them, like, wait, respect this business, and really a lot of the first generations of the guys, because this is back when it was in the backyard of Johnny and Chris, Rico Dynamite. This was an old school mentality of, it was hot outside, but you didn't care. You put them in the garage, you let them sweat it out when they be wrestling. You teach them grappling, then they do an hour of calisthenics and all the other crazy stuff, and then they get in with us. And of course, we ain't gonna hold back. But it was that old school mentality, just like Slammers was, where you go out there and you just go, and you had to do what you had to do to respect this business. Because if you didn't respect this business, you had no business being in it.
Yeah, that's 100%.
It's been quite a while since I've trained at the Santinos, but every time I have gone back, it's always been, they've always welcomed me back there. They always, told the wrestlers or the trainees there, they give them a little bit of my background and saying, hey, this is Angel. If anybody's ever seen him, they'll tell them some of my story. And, they let me go in there and kind of give them some of my advice, because I've been doing this well over 98, Kind of lost track of how many years I've been doing this now.
22 years, friend.
Yeah.
22 years.
So
well, they should be honored to have you there, and you've obviously proven yourself. And just like they say, you're always welcome back there. You're always welcome back here, man. And
thank you, Kris.
Just a great catching up with you and seeing you again, and just sharing all your extreme memories right here. So, just again, if you want, like, before we officially close it out, any parting words for some of the fans out there, some of the people watching, and just give them any plugs or anything, how they can find you and what you're doing nowadays, and then we'll say sayonara in a second here.
I'm not really big on social media. I really don't. I mean, I think somewhere there's an Angel XPW Facebook that I haven't probably been on for like 5 years. Don't have any of the new modern stuff. I really just don't do that type of stuff. I'm kind of just do my own thing. So you really can't really find me anywhere. But other than that, I mean, I've had fun in my career. And the one thing I'll probably will always take is always, when I first started Slammers back in the day, it was very rough. Like I said, they never really trained me in wrestling. It was always that beat down.
Yeah.
And for many, many months, I always thought, well, shit, maybe I'm not ready for this. I'm not a big dude. I mean, height wise, I was average, but back then, if you're going to be on WWE, you had to be well over 6'2" or something, and be muscular. I wasn't that. And I always kept thinking to myself, well, maybe is this really business is right for me? Am I really going to do anything with this? One thing I can always say to any new generation of wrestlers come in there is never give it up. I'm 41 years old now, and I was one of the lucky ones that actually had a great career. I've got to travel the world wrestling. And if I would have quit months and months into wrestling school, or quit months and months after many of the injuries I suffered in XPW and every other federations I've been in, or quit because, I all of a sudden didn't like the business because a promoter screwed me over, or I just felt wrestling had changed, I would have never had the career I've had.
Right.
And the point is, the reason a lot of wrestlers just can't give it up is because there's always that one chance, that you're the dream is still, and you never know when you're going to be. I'm 41. I'm probably in better shape than I've ever been now. I mean, before you called me up, I was in the gym for like an hour and a half. Now they opened them back up.
Oh, wow.
So I'm hitting the gym. Cool. I'm not saying I probably won't come out of retirement, but I'd be ready to do it. But, it's that mentality of it's that toughness of wrestling was from the 40s and 50s, even in the 20s, when it was legit real, that you had to be tough and never, ever give up. And to all these inspiring wrestlers out there, when it becomes hard, just run it. Just run it. Just keep trying it, because eventually, you never know what opportunities are going to lie ahead of you.
Right. I couldn't have said it better. I could not have said it better myself, Angel. Once again, thank you so much for joining us here. We are out of time, and man, it's been a great journey through time. Night to remember here on the interview, and again, thank you for sharing your extreme memories right here on Xtreme Memories. John, Angel, thank you so much again for joining us. Fans, don't forget to like us, comment, and subscribe to the Wrestling Chatter channel, which is what broadcasts Xtreme Memories. There's plenty of other shows on there, like Missed Opportunities, which I'm a part of, and a few others. So be sure to please subscribe to Wrestling Chatter channel. Don't forget Xtreme Memories. It's going to be the 15th and the 30th of every month. So tune back in, and we will see you next time on Xtreme Memories for Angel the Hardcore Homo, the wrestler formerly known as the Hardcore Homo, another name at Lucha Baboom. And then, of course, John Chavez for you. My name is Kris Kloss. We'll see you guys next time when we dive in and get into some extreme Memories. Thank you, folks.
Thank you for watching Xtreme Memories, hosted by Kris Kloss. He's dropping new episodes every month on the 15th and 30th. You can be the first to tune in by subscribing to the Wrestling Chatter channel right here on YouTube. See you next time.